The camera soars over Seoul at dawn. The city awakens in layers of glass and steel, skyscrapers touching the pink clouds, streets beginning to pulse with the life of millions. Among the luxurious buildings of the Gangnam district, a mansion stands out, surrounded by high walls and gardens that seem taken from an ancient painting. This is where Minji lives, heiress to one of South Korea's largest conglomerates. A 23-year-old young woman whose steps are watched, whose choices are measured, whose entire life was designed before she could even hold a pencil. Minji wakes this morning like every other, to the soft sound of classical music programmed to play at 6 o'clock. Her room is immense, decorated with contemporary art and imported furniture, but there's something empty about that space, as if all that beauty were just a set designed to hide loneliness. She gets up, walks to the window, and observes the city below. There are days when she feels she lives in a golden cage, however spacious it may be. Her mother has already left the day's itinerary on her desk. Morning meeting with stylist, charity lunch at noon, etiquette class in the afternoon. Everything planned, controlled, decided by others. On the other side of the city, in a neighborhood where streets are narrower and the smell of street food mixes with the sound of horns, Kofi wakes in a small room shared with two other workers. He came from Ghana 8 months ago, cross continents carrying only a backpack and a dream, to build a dignified life, help his family left behind, prove to himself that it's possible to win even when the entire world seems to say otherwise. He works at a factory during the day and makes deliveries at night, sleeps little, smiles much. There's a light in him that life's harshness hasn't yet managed to extinguish, a generosity in his eyes that makes people stop to look twice. On this spring morning, when cherry blossoms begin to bloom throughout Seoul, destiny begins weaving its invisible threads. Minji, tired of being conducted from commitment to commitment, asks the driver to let her walk alone through Yeouido Park. It's a small rebellion, but for her it means everything. She wants to feel the wind on her face without someone telling her to adjust her hair. Wants to walk aimlessly without it being a scandal. Her security guards follow at a distance, instructed not to interfere unless necessary. Kofi is in the same park during his brief lunch break, sitting under a cherry tree with a simple lunchbox. He observes the petals falling like pink snow and thinks of his mother, his sisters, the village where he grew up. He thinks about how beauty exists everywhere. You just need eyes to see it. And then he sees her. Minji walks slowly, almost distracted, looking at the sky, and trips on an exposed root. It happens fast. She loses her balance, her purse flies through the air, and Kofi stands up in reflex, running to catch her before she falls. Their hands meet for an instant, and something inexplicable crosses that touch. Minji lifts her eyes and meets his, two universes that should never cross, two worlds separated by oceans and privileges. And yet, in that moment, there are only two human beings recognizing each other in a way that transcends any logic. Kofi smiles, a genuine smile, warm, and she feels something bloom in her chest, something she thought had been suffocated long ago. "Thank you," she says in Korean, and he responds in the same language with a heavy accent but sincere effort. "No problem. Are you okay?" They talk for only a few minutes, but those minutes extend like hours in both their memories. Minji discovers that he works hard, that he came from far away, that he has big dreams despite small circumstances. Kofi discovers that she laughs genuinely when she forgets to be who others expect her to be, that there's sadness in her eyes despite all the wealth, that she's kind in a way that doesn't match the expensive clothes she wears. When the security guards approach, subtly indicating it's time to go, Minji feels something rare, the desire to stay, to continue there, under the cherry trees, talking with a stranger who paradoxically seems less strange than people she's known for years. In the following days, she returns to the park. She tells no one, doesn't explain, simply invents excuses to be there. And he also returns at the same time, waiting without being sure if she appear. When they meet again, the smile of both is the confession of something that's just beginning. They begin to see each other regularly, always in secret, always in a hurry, but each meeting is a small universe where nothing else matters. Kofi tells her stories of his land, of African heat, of stars that seem closer there, of songs his mother sang. Minji tells him of her golden prison, of dreams she could never pursue, of how sometimes she feels she's living someone else's life. As weeks pass, what was curiosity transforms into something deeper. They begin exchanging messages, always through an app Minji created in secret. They talk late into the night, when each should be sleeping. He sends her photos of sunsets seen from the factory. She sends him audio recordings reciting poetry. They're falling in love without permission, without logic, with the devastating force of that which is true. When they finally kiss under a cherry tree at twilight, with petals falling around them like silent blessings, both know they're crossing a line from which there's no return. If this love has already touched your heart, leave your like and continue with us on this journey. But every secret, however well kept, eventually finds the light. A photo is taken by someone in the park, a blurred but recognizable image of Minji laughing with a black man, far from her guardian's eyes. The photo reaches her older brother's hands, who immediately informs their parents. The reaction is like an earthquake. Minji's father, a man who built an empire with an iron fist and never tolerated disobedience, summons his daughter to his office. It's an intimidating room, with dark mahogany walls and a silence that weighs like lead. When Minji enters, she sees in her father's eyes a contained fury she knows well. He doesn't shout, which is worse. He speaks with calculated coldness about reputation, about tradition, about the family name she's staining. Who's this man? A worker? An immigrant? Have you completely lost your mind? Her mother is beside him, equally shocked, talking about shame, about scandal, about how this can ruin carefully planned matrimonial alliances. Minji tries to explain, tries to speak about feelings, about real connection, but her words are cut off before they can bloom. You are a Min, says the father, as if that explained everything, as if her surname were a life sentence. They forbid her from leaving without escort, confiscate her phone, increase surveillance. Minji becomes a prisoner in her own home. Days pass without her being able to speak with Kofi. He waits in the park, day after day, worried, confused, feeling that something terrible has happened. Finally, he manages to send a message through one of Minji's friends, one of the few people who knows the secret. The message is brief but desperate. I found out. I can't leave anymore. Don't give up on me. Kofi feels the ground collapse beneath his feet, but something in him, something forged in all the difficulties he's already faced, refuses to accept defeat. He decides to write a letter in carefully translated Korean and asks Minji's friend to deliver it. In the letter, he writes about true love, about how the borders that separate people are created by fear and pride, about how he loves her not despite their differences, but including all of them. He writes about dignity, about how working with his hands doesn't make him less human, about how he was born with less but never with less heart. The letter reaches Minji's hands on a night when she's on the edge of despair. She reads and rereads it until she memorizes every word, and in those lines finds the courage she was looking for. She decides to face her parents again, but this time not as an obedient daughter asking permission, but as an adult woman declaring her truth. The conversation is a battle. Her father threatens to disinherit her. Her mother cries, speaking of disappointment. Her brother calls her naive. But Minji doesn't back down. For the first time in her life, she fights for something that's truly hers. You gave me everything, she says with a trembling but firm voice, except the freedom to choose my own path. This man you despise sees me truly, not as an heiress, not as a name, but as me. And I love him. I can lose everything, but I won't lose him. The silence that follows is deafening. Her father looks at her as if looking at a stranger, and perhaps that's exactly what she's become to him in this moment. Someone he doesn't recognize, someone who dares defy centuries of tradition. The family tries a new tactic. They offer Kofi money to leave Korea, to disappear from Minji's life. The proposal is made through intermediaries, men in suits who appear at the factory where he works, offering an amount that would completely change his life and his family's life. It's a fortune, enough to build a comfortable future in Ghana. Kofi listens to the offer in silence, and for a moment the men think they've won. But then he smiles, a sad smile, and says something they didn't expect. Her love is not for sale. Neither is mine. When Minji discovers the bribery attempt, something in her breaks completely. She realizes how far her family is willing to go to control her life. That night, she makes a decision that will change everything. She packs some clothes, takes the jewelry she inherited from her grandmother, and leaves the mansion in the silence of dawn. It's not an impulsive escape. It's a conscious choice of a woman who's finally taking the reins of her own existence. She goes to the neighborhood where Kofi lives, climbs the narrow stairs to the shared room, and when he opens the door, surprised and worried, she simply says, "I chose you. I chose us." If you believe true love overcomes any barrier, subscribe and share this story. The days that follow are the most challenging both have ever faced. Minji, accustomed to every kind of comfort, now shares a tiny room, learns to cook on an old stove, discovers the real weight of money when it's counted and recounted. But there's something liberating about this simple life, something authentic she never experienced. Kofi teaches her to see beauty in small things, in well-cooked rice, in laughter shared with neighbors, in honest tiredness after a day's work. He sells some of her jewelry to open a small business, a store of African products that slowly begins to attract curious customers. Minji uses her business education to help expand the enterprise. Together, they work from sunrise to sunset, building something with their own hands. It's difficult. There are days when the body aches and the heart doubts. But there's also a visceral joy in creating something together and being true partners. At night, lying on the simple mattress, they talk about the future, about the children they'll one day have, about how they'll raise them to know both cultures, to be bridges between worlds. But the drama is far from over. Minji's family doesn't give up. They use their connections to complicate Kofi's work visa, create bureaucratic obstacles for the business, spread rumors that drive away potential investors. It's a silent but devastating war. There's a moment when Kofi receives a notification that his visa may be revoked, and the terror of being separated from Minji, of being forced to return while she stays, is almost unbearable. Minji cries for the first time since leaving home, not from regret, but from helpless anger against a system that allows money to buy even justice. They seek legal help, but the lawyers they can afford are limited. That's when an unexpected twist happens. Minji's grandmother, a matriarch who is always respected but rarely heard, decides to intervene. She's a woman of almost 80 years who lived through war, Reconstruction, who saw the family grow from nothing to everything. She asks to see her granddaughter, and Minji, hesitant but hopeful, accepts the meeting at a traditional tea house. The conversation between them is delicate at first, full of loaded silences. The grandmother observes Minji with eyes that have seen generations, and finally says, "When I was your age, I loved a man my parents didn't approve of." Not because he was from another country, but because he was poor. I gave in to pressure, marry who they chose, and spent my entire life wondering, what if? Minji listens, silent tears rolling down her face. Don't repeat my mistake, the grandmother continues. Life is too short to live others' dreams. The grandmother uses her influence, discreet but powerful, to begin changing the tide. She speaks with her son, with her daughter-in-law, appeals not to reason but to heart, asks if they really want to lose their daughter forever out of pride. It's a slow, painful process, but she plants seeds of doubt in those unshakable certainties. Meanwhile, she also helps Kofi discreetly, ensuring his visa is renewed, that the business has the necessary licenses. She doesn't do this openly, but through channels that only someone with her experience and connections knows. Months pass. Minji and Kofi's business begins to truly prosper. They open a second store, then a third. Their story somehow begins to spread, not as scandal, but as inspiration. Young interracial couples seek them out, thanking them for having the courage to exist publicly, to not hide. They become, unintentionally, symbols of a Korea that's changing, that's slowly learning to embrace diversity. One night, almost a year after Minji left the mansion, she receives a call. It's her mother. The voice on the other end of the line is different, softer, broken by emotion. She says Minji is missed, that the house is empty without her, that perhaps, just perhaps, they can talk. Minji feels her heart race, but also feels Kofi's hand holding hers, giving strength. She accepts to meet her parents, but this time with Kofi by her side, as a couple, as equal partners. The meeting is tense. The family gathers again in the dark mahogany room, but this time there's also Kofi, sitting beside Minji, wearing his best clothes but maintaining his natural dignity. Minji's father stares at him for a moment, and everyone can feel the weight of that gaze. Kofi doesn't look away, doesn't bow, but also doesn't challenge. He simply exists, confident in who he is and in the love he's built. The father finally speaks, and his voice carries a complexity of emotions. You took my daughter from me. Kofi responds calmly, with all respect, sir, your daughter made her own choices. I just had the fortune of being chosen by her. And I promise I'll honor that choice every day of my life. There's a tense silence, and then something unexpected happens. Minji's mother begins to cry, not from anger, but from a deep sadness mixed with something that might be acceptance. She looks at her daughter and sees, perhaps for the first time really sees, that Minji is happy in a way she never was before. Comment love without borders to show they deserve to be together. The reconciliation isn't instantaneous or complete. There are wounds that take time to heal, mistrust that needs to be slowly undone. But it's a beginning. The grandmother smiles discreetly, knowing her seeds have finally germinated. In the following months, Minji's family begins, gradually, hesitantly, to be part of the couple's life. First, there are invitations to brief lunches, then to family celebrations, then to business meetings where Minji's father, impressed despite himself, offers advice about expansion. Kofi brings his mother and sisters to visit them in Korea. The meeting between both families is initially awkward, lost in translation and custom, but there's something universally recognizable in the love both have for their children. Kofi's mother and Minji's mother, two women from completely different worlds, find common ground in maternal concern and recipes they exchange, and stories of when their children were small. It's touching to see how love can build bridges where logic sees only abysses. 2 years after that first meeting under the cherry trees, Minji and Kofi get married. It's a ceremony that mixes traditions with Korean attire and African fabrics, with blessings in multiple languages, with guests from all corners of the world. Minji's grandmother is matron of honor, her father, though still reserved, walks with her to the altar. When Kofi sees her approaching, his eyes shine with tears he doesn't try to hide. And when they kiss, sealing their vows before everyone, there are applause that echo not only in that hall, but symbolically through all the barriers they dared to cross. Their business grows, transforms into a respected brand that celebrates cultural fusion, that employs refugees and immigrants, that donates part of the profits to organizations that combat xenophobia. Minji and Kofi become successful entrepreneurs, but more importantly, they become living examples that love knows no borders when it's true. They have children, beautiful children who grow up speaking 3 languages, who celebrate Chuseok and also Ghanaian harvest festivals, who carry in their faces the promise of a more integrated world. There are still difficult moments. Prejudices don't disappear overnight, and sometimes their children come home from school with painful questions about why they look different, why some parents don't let them play with other children. But Minji and Kofi teach them that their difference is their strength, that they carry the best of 2 worlds, that they were forged in love that defeated an entire empire of prejudices. At night, when the children are sleeping and the house is finally silent, Minji and Kofi sometimes go out to walk. They return to Yoeo Park, to the place where it all began, and sit under the same cherry trees. The flowers have already fallen and been born 1,000 times since that first meeting. But the love between them has only deepened, strengthened by every battle won, by every obstacle overcome together. Kofi holds Minji's hand, that same hand he held when she stumbled so many years ago, and she rests her head on his shoulder, that place that became her refuge against all storms. They look at the stars above Seoul, and Kofi says they're the same stars that shine over Ghana, that shine over all parts of the world, connecting us all in ways we often forget. Minji smiles, that smile he was the first to make genuinely bloom, and responds that love is like those stars. It shines regardless of borders, of languages, of traditions. And when they kiss there, under the night sky, with the illuminated city around them, it's as if the entire universe celebrates with them the most beautiful victory possible, the victory of the human heart over all artificial constructs that try to limit it. The story of Minji and Kofi becomes legend in their community, told and retold, inspiring others to have courage. Minji's father, in his later years, finally admits, in a private conversation with his son-in-law, but he was wrong, that Kofi not only proved worthy of his daughter, but made her a better, more complete, happier version than he could ever have planned. It's a difficult admission for a man accustomed to always being right, but it's also a testament to how love has the power to transform even the most hardened hearts. And so life continues, not with an ending, because stories of true love don't have endings. They just keep unfolding into new chapters, new challenges, new joys. Minji and Kofi grow old together. Their hair turns gray, but their eyes still shine with that same spark from the first meeting. They raise grandchildren who grow up in a slightly more open world, slightly more tolerant, in part because people like them had the courage to love openly, to exist authentically. And when decades after that first meeting, they return once more to the park, now walking more slowly, supporting each other not only emotionally, but also physically, they still see magic in the cherry blossoms blooming. Because those trees witnessed the birth of something that seemed impossible, the flowering of a love that everyone said couldn't exist, and yet not only existed, but prospered, multiplied, spread seeds of hope in soil many judged sterile. The camera slowly pulls away from the couple under the cherry trees, rising, until they're just 2 small dots in an immense park, in a vast city, in an enormous world. But in those 2 dots is contained a truth that resonates through all humanity. That love, when it's real, when it's courageous, when it refuses to accept the prisons they try to impose on it, has the power not only to change two lives, but to transform generations, to rewrite what's possible, to prove that the most beautiful battles are those fought with the heart. And as the image fades, the cherry trees continue blooming, each spring a new promise that beauty can be born even in the most unlikely places. That love always finds a way, always builds bridges, always wins, always, always.